Hello everyone. I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Story 1. When 72-year-old widow Lillian Moore died peacefully in her quaint Oregon home, the small town mourned the loss of their kindest soul, until a plumber discovered a false wall in her basement. Behind it, 27 ledgers, each detailing names, dates, and disappearances. What began as a routine estate cleanup spiraled into a chilling hunt for a serial killer who kept perfect books, hidden in plain sight for decades. April 18, 2022, Ashbrook, Oregon. The house at 117 Meadow Lane was one of the oldest in Ashbrook, a quaint, ivy-covered two-story home with white shutters, a creaking porch swing, and a rain-soaked American flag above the mailbox. Locals knew it well, not because of its grandeur, but because of its owner, Lillian Moore. Lillian had been a fixture of the town for over 40 years. Church choir every Sunday, apple pies delivered to sick neighbors, a gentle voice and a laugh like a piano chord. When she passed away in her sleep, no one questioned it. She was 72. She had lived alone since her husband's death in 1997. No children, no enemies, just Lillian and her roses. So when the estate executor called a plumber to investigate a small leak in the basement for resale prep, no one expected that what he would find behind the wall would unravel a decades-long mystery that had haunted Oregon's unsolved case files. The Call James Peary had been a plumber in Ashbrook for 28 years. He'd worked on Lillian's house before, twice in fact, but never ventured into the back corner of the basement. That part had always been locked off with an odd collection of old crates and toolboxes. No reason to go digging through a retired woman's memories. But today, the leak came from the far back, near the furnace. He stepped through cobwebs, dragging his tool bag behind him, when he tapped the wall near a pipe. Hollow. He tapped again. This wasn't drywall. It was plywood, painted and dusted to blend in. Curious, James pried off one board with a screwdriver. The space behind it was about 4 feet deep and 6 feet wide. Lit only by the flashlight on his phone, James saw something strange. Stacks of composition notebooks. Dozens, neatly arranged. And sitting atop the first pile, a small plaque, tarnished but legible. Ledger room, do not disturb. The ledgers. James didn't touch anything at first. He backed away slowly, heart pounding. He wasn't a cop. He wasn't trained for this. But he'd seen enough weird crap over the years to know when something wasn't right. He called the Ashbrook PD. Within the hour, the house was swarming with detectives. Lead investigator Sergeant Maureen Holloway took one look at the ledgers and called the Oregon State Police. By that evening, the state crime lab had confirmed what the town would learn days later. Each ledger contained detailed accounts of people, names, addresses, physical descriptions, and every single one of them was missing. Some were local, others were from neighboring states. Some cases dated back to the 1980s. All were marked with strange codes and exact dates, and at the end of every entry, a red check mark. Who was Lillian Moore? The town couldn't believe it. The Lillian they knew wasn't capable of hurting anyone. But suddenly, every scrap of her life was under a microscope. Her late husband, Charles Moore, had died of a heart attack at age 63. No autopsy had been performed, just a closed casket funeral and a quiet burial. Her house had no history of complaints, no 911 calls, no missing persons reports filed from her residence. Yet, here they were, with 27 ledgers, each filled with meticulous notes in perfect penmanship. Subject number 14, male, mid-30s, last seen leaving Hitchman Trail at 5:42 p.m., lured with truck trouble. Response, compliant. Site prepared. Check complete. No trace left. Over and over. Site prepared. Check complete. The basement. The crime scene unit returned for a deeper investigation. Behind the ledgers, a false floorboard. Beneath it, concrete that had been dug and repoured multiple times. Forensics teams drilled into one section. They hit bone within 30 minutes. By the end of the week, human remains were confirmed in 5 separate locations under the basement. Some skeletonized, others preserved in plastic sheeting. Dental records matched at least 2 victims, both missing hikers from the late 90s, never connected until now. And still, the house had been silent, peaceful. Lillian had baked muffins the same week one of those bodies was likely buried. FBI involvement. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit sent a profiler, Agent Dana Wilkes, to review the ledgers. Her initial findings were chilling. "This isn't the work of someone deranged," she said. "This is surgical, controlled, like someone documenting lab experiments. She wasn't impulsive. She was disciplined." Worse, the codes in the ledger, combinations of letters and numbers, seemed to indicate locations, possibly burial sites. Multiple, as in, Lillian may have operated far beyond her home. The Widow case breaks. News outlets dubbed it the Widow Ledger case within days. Old interviews surfaced, church bulletins, photographs of Lillian smiling at potlucks and quilting bees. But with each smiling photo, a deeper horror emerged. One ledger entry described a missing woman from Idaho in 2002. Lillian had visited a quilting expo there that same month. Another entry matched the disappearance of a hitchhiker in Nevada in 1995. Lillian's gas receipts from that summer showed a purchase within 12 miles of the dump site. There were no coincidences, and she had kept everything. The clue in Ledger Number 9. The most disturbing discovery came from Ledger 9, an entry that included a drawing of a tattoo. A stylized compass rose with a broken north point. It matched a still unsolved missing persons case from 2006. Jacob Harrow, a 22-year-old from Montana, who vanished after leaving a music festival. Jacob's mother had described the tattoo in detail during a 2007 press conference. Lillian had drawn it exactly, and next to his entry was a phrase that appeared nowhere else in the ledgers. Felt wrong. Too loud. Ended quickly. Agent Wilkes stared at it for 10 minutes. "That's emotion," she whispered. "This one affected her. Whoever he was, he broke the pattern." Who helped her? Authorities now faced a terrifying question. Did Lillian Moore act alone? She was in her 70s. Some of the remains were buried within the last decade. She would have been 60 plus by then, and some entries were clearly marked with a secondary set of initials. Handwriting experts confirmed 2 distinct pen styles in certain books. Could there have been an accomplice? Was it her husband before he died? Or someone else still alive? The final ledger. The 27th and final ledger had just 1 page used. It read, April 12th, 2022, female, mid-30s, friendly, asked for help lifting groceries, invited in, didn't expect her to notice the smell, didn't expect her to fight. Last one? There was no check mark. That date was 6 days before Lillian Moore's death. April 12th, 2022, Ashbrook, Oregon, 6 days before Lillian's death. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. Kara Dillon, 34, wasn't the type to overshare. A freelance photographer and podcaster based in Portland, Kara had taken a few weeks to travel the Oregon countryside, collecting stories and photographs of forgotten towns for a new audio series called Echoes of Nowhere. Ashbrook wasn't even on her original route, but a broken fan belt and a detour off I-5 landed her on the sleepy, tree-lined main street of the little town, where a rustic antiques shop and old bakery charmed her enough to stay the night. That's when she met Lillian. A chance encounter. It was around 3:30 p.m. on April 12th when Kara parked her car outside the Ashbrook General Store. She was fumbling with her camera bag when she heard the voice behind her. "Darling, would you help an old lady with her trunk?" She turned to see a woman, early 70s, small-framed but spry, smiling at her with a bundle of groceries balanced precariously on one hip. Kara smiled back. Of course. An invitation. Kara helped Lillian load the bags into the back of a pale green Volvo. The two talked briefly, Lillian cheerful and curious, Kara polite and warm. When Lillian learned Kara was traveling solo, her response was immediate. "Well, you simply must come over for some tea before you go. It's not every day we get company." Something about her felt safe, grandmotherly. So Kara said yes. Inside 117 Meadow Lane, the house smelled like cinnamon and lavender. Photos of Lillian and her late husband, Charles, lined the hallway. A framed cross-stitch by the door read, "Bless this mess." They sat in the kitchen, sipping tea and munching on ginger cookies. Kara asked polite questions. Where Lillian had grown up, how long she'd lived in Ashbrook, what life was like alone. "Lonely at times," Lillian admitted, "but the quiet suits me." Then her smile faded just slightly. "Though the walls remember things, you know. If you listen long enough." Kara chuckled. She thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Something off. Kara noticed it first when she asked to use the restroom. Lillian hesitated. "Of course, just don't mind the hallway creaks." The bathroom was clean, tidy, but something was off. There was a smell, not urine or mildew, but faint, chemical, like bleach and copper. Kara glanced down the hall as she left the bathroom. One door was ajar, a small office, she assumed. But on the floor, just barely visible, a dark brown stain, circular, blotted at the edges. She leaned in, then heard the unmistakable sound of a footstep behind her. The shift. Lillian stood in the hallway, her smile gone, her posture wrong, still, but rigid, as if she were waiting for Kara to move first. "Did you enjoy the tea?" Lillian asked softly. Kara's throat felt tight. "Yeah, it was great. I should probably head out, though. Long drive." She backed away, heading for the front door. "Of course," Lillian said. "It's always nice to meet someone who listens." Then she added, "Even nicer when they stay." The escape. As Kara reached the door, her instincts screamed at her. She looked at the deadbolt. It was engaged. Lillian hadn't locked it when they came in. Kara turned the latch and flung the door open. Behind her, she heard something fall. A mug? A chair? Then Lillian's voice, low and guttural. "You shouldn't have gone near the office." Kara sprinted to her car, got in, started the engine, and as she pulled away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Lillian was standing in the road, not waving, just staring. Aftermath. Kara didn't report the incident immediately. She told herself it was nothing, just a weird interaction with an old woman. Maybe trauma from years of traveling alone, maybe nerves, maybe imagination. But 2 days later, she uploaded a voice memo to her private notes app. "Something's wrong in that house," she said. "The smell, the stain, the deadbolt." She looked at me like she wasn't done, like I interrupted something. That memo would go unheard for 6 days, until Lillian Moore died in her sleep, and the ledgers were found. Reconnecting the dots, when the police found the 27th ledger with Kara's description, Agent Wilkes sent out a quiet but urgent inquiry to the Ashbrook community. One name surfaced. The general store clerk remembered a young woman who helped Lillian with groceries that week. He even had security footage. Facial recognition confirmed it. Kara Dillon. And when police contacted her 2 days later, she had one question. "Was there a red check mark next to my name?" They told her no. Her voice shook. "Then I was the last." The interview agent Wilkes met Kara in Portland for a recorded interview. Kara played her voice memo. She described the room, the smell, Lillian's switch in demeanor, then something strange. She said something to me. I forgot it until now. She said, "It's nicer when they stay." Then she said, "The wall listens even when I sleep." Wilkes leaned forward. "The wall?" She kept glancing at one section of her hallway, Kara replied, like it was going to answer her. Hidden room theory. Forensic scans of the basement confirmed something chilling. Sound insulation, deliberately installed around the false wall, designed to trap sound inside. No one ever heard screams. Lillian had engineered the silence, but Kara had interrupted a possible ritual, one that had followed a pattern across every ledger. The T, the trust, the vulnerability, then the execution. Kara had broken the ritual, and now Wilkes suspected something deeper. That entry in the last ledger, it wasn't just documentation. It was a trigger. And when she missed her mark, it unraveled her. Death by unfinished pattern. Lillian Moore died in her sleep on April 18th. No signs of struggle, no poison, no foul play, just gone. But what stood out was what the coroner found. Her final meal, ginger cookies and tea, the same kind she served Kara, and beside her bed, a red pen. Cap removed, ink still wet. April 21st, 2022, Ashbrook, Oregon. In the wake of the ledger's discovery, a dedicated task force had been formed to cross-reference entries with national missing persons databases. One entry in Ledger 6, however, stood out, not for what it said, but for what it didn't. The page was mostly blank. No name, no location, just a date. August 5th, 1998. And in the right-hand margin, written vertically in different handwriting. G, escaped, saw too much. Error not to follow. Agent Dana Wilkes froze when she read it. This wasn't Lillian's usual style. Clinical, detached, methodical. This was emotional, an outburst, a warning. The team dubbed him G, the one who got away. And after 2 days of digging, they found him. His real name was George Baylor. He lived in a rundown trailer off the coast in Lincoln County, Oregon. Under the radar, no driver's license, no social media footprint. Only traceable through a 1998 missing persons report filed by his sister in Salem, after he'd vanished for nearly a month before calling her in a panic. When authorities arrived, Baylor refused to open the door. It took a phone call from Wilkes herself and the word Lillian to get him to talk. "You shouldn't have said her name," he rasped. "Not out loud." She listens. Interview transcript, April 22nd, 2022. Wilkes, George, what do you remember about August 5th, 1998? Baylor, she called it a kindness. That's what I remember. Said I was too broken to be useful, but that she'd do me the mercy anyway. Wilkes, so you knew her? Baylor, we all knew her. The ones on the trail. I met her at a gas station outside Eugene. She bought me a coffee, asked me about my family, told me I had kind eyes. Wilkes, then what happened? Baylor, she invited me back to her place to rest. I was exhausted, hadn't eaten right in days. She gave me food, a hot shower. It felt safe. Wilkes, but it wasn't? Baylor, number because I woke up and there were chains on my wrists. The basement wasn't just for burials. Baylor described what no one else had survived to report. A holding room before the false wall. A steel cot. A bucket. A humming noise in the walls like running water, but never stopping. She spoke to me through a little grate, he said. Didn't open the door for days. Just kept reading from some little black book. A ledger. She told me she was saving me, that the world chewed people like me up, but that she could make it all stop. I begged. I told her I could disappear, never talk, never come back. And then she opened the door. How he escaped. She sat next to him, offered tea, said, "Sometimes God speaks plainly, and he says today is your turn." But when she turned to reach for something, George lunged. I hit her with the tray, hard, bolted up the stairs, kicked through a side door. He sprinted 5 blocks to a Shell station. No one believed his story. No police report was filed. He fled town the next day and never looked back. But he remembered the look on her face as he ran. Not anger, not fear. Disappointment. The ledger confirms it. Baylor's story matches an obscure entry in Ledger 6, dated August 5, 1998. Subject recovered poorly. Too many contaminants. Malfunction in behavioral stage. Let go. Reinforcement required. Trust broken. Practice imperfect. The entry ends with something that appears nowhere else in the ledgers. A jagged black X. The practice victim? Wilkes begins to consider a new theory. What if George wasn't a failure? What if he was a rehearsal? Each ledger grew more structured over time, her methods more refined. What if Lillian had spent decades perfecting her process? George might have been one of the first. Inside Ledger 1 back at Ashbrook PD, an analyst discovers something in Ledger 1. Handwriting far less clean, entries partial, erased, scribbled over. One page catches Wilkes's eye. It's not a victim description, it's a list of questions. How long before sedation fades? Can subjects survive 3-day isolation? Does hot water make them calmer? How many pounds of concrete per body? The final question, when will it feel like a blessing instead of work? Wilkes's revelation. Wilkes, now nearly sleepless and obsessed, lays out a timeline across her motel wall. It starts in 1982 with the first confirmed entry. It ends with Cara Dillon. But what strikes her isn't the duration, it's the evolution. She was learning, testing, perfecting. Each ledger is cleaner than the last, the process more exact. But why the records? Why document everything so precisely? Unless she wanted someone to find them. She wanted a reader. George's final warning. Before Wilkes leaves Lincoln County, George Baylor gives her one final warning. The ledgers weren't everything, he says. She had another book, one she didn't write in. It was already full. Wilkes freezes. What kind of book? George looks her dead in the eyes. A Bible. But the pages weren't scripture. They were names like people she still owed. April 24th, 2022, Ashbrook, Oregon, Evidence Room 3B. The atmosphere in the Ashbrook Police Evidence Room had shifted from sterile to sacred. Wilkes stood over a locked, rubber-sealed box pulled from Lillian Moore's bedroom closet, a box that hadn't drawn much attention initially. It had been cataloged as personal effects, religious, mostly because it contained rosary beads, hymnal leaflets, and a well-worn Bible with a leather cover faded nearly gray. But this wasn't just a devotional artifact. This was the book George Baylor had described, the one he claimed Lillian never wrote in, because as he put it, it was already full. Opening the book, Wilkes slipped on gloves and opened the front cover. Inside the first page were the typical printings, Psalms, dedications, King James edition. But on the inside flap was a name written in ink, Lillian E. Moore. 1974, below it, in faded pencil, a second name, M. E. Carlisle. That name meant nothing to the Ashbrook PD, but it meant everything to Wilkes, because a 1976 missing persons report from rural Nebraska listed one Margaret Elaine Carlisle as vanishing under suspicious circumstances. She was Lillian's younger sister, and the first name Wilkes had ever seen connected to Lillian's past. The Bible's true purpose. Wilkes flipped to the second page and froze. The Bible's margins, handwritten in tight, angular script, were filled with names. Not scripture. Victims. Not just the ones from the ledgers, but names that didn't appear in any ledger. And dates. Cryptic notations. Some had check marks, others had dashes. A few were circled in red. One page near Judges had just 2 words: owed blood. The chilling truth hit her like a freight train. This was the original ledger. Before the notebooks, before the ritualistic entries. This was where the names first went. The genesis of Lillian's accounting. The red circle names. Wilkes isolated 12 names circled in red ink. 9 of them had no record. Not missing persons, not arrests, not hospital visits. Nothing. Ghosts. The other 3, all still alive. Wilkes pulled their records immediately. Samuel Ferner, 65, Vietnam vet, living in Portland under state disability. Kelsey Dunn, 41, nurse practitioner, Boise, Idaho. Micah Nolan, 33, incarcerated for armed robbery in Spokane. Why were these people in her Bible? And more importantly, why circled? The pattern emerges. Late that night, Wilkes stared at Lillian's Bible, the ledgers spread around her like a desecrated cathedral. She noticed something subtle. Every red circled name appeared before a sudden gap in ledger entries. Days, sometimes weeks, where Lillian hadn't recorded anything. Then she'd pick up again, often with emotionally detached language like, reset complete, preparation renewed, chorus stabilized. Wilkes whispered aloud. She was visiting them. Visiting the first name. Wilkes prioritized Samuel Ferner, the oldest, a reclusive man living in Portland's northeast quarter. He had survived 2 strokes and spoke with difficulty. But when Wilkes showed him Lillian's photo, his expression collapsed. She came to me in '85, he said, hands trembling. Told me I needed to confess. Wilkes asked what he had to confess. Ferner didn't answer at first, but then he leaned in, whispering. She knew about me and Carla. Carla had been his wife. She vanished in 1984. The case was never solved. Ferner had always claimed she left him. She told me she'd already forgiven me, said she'd seen how the blood spilled. But I hadn't told anyone that part. Not a soul. Lillian the cleanser? Wilkes's working theory began to shift. Lillian hadn't been killing random victims. She'd been targeting people who had dark secrets, things no one else knew. Could she have believed she was offering some twisted form of redemption? A sentence from the Bible's back pages seemed to support this. Those unjudged in life shall be weighed by me. It is not murder. It is balance. It was dated 1978, 4 years after Margaret Carlisle disappeared. Wilkes makes a call agent. Wilkes contacted Boise PD to arrange a visit to Kelsey Dunn, the second red-circled name. She also requested to speak with Micah Nolan, still in state prison. But before either interview could happen, she got a call from the Ashbrook Sheriff's Department. You need to come back, immediately. Wilkes returned by dawn and found officers gathered around her desk. Someone had delivered an envelope addressed to her. No return address. Inside, a single page torn from a ledger, and on it, her own name. A warning or a threat. It wasn't a death sentence, not like the others. The page simply read, Subject W, approaching knowledge, watching too close, might listen, might change. And below that, in the same red ink used in the Bible, decide what you want to become. Wilkes sat back, stunned. There was only one person who could have written that recently, and she'd been dead for a week. Or had she? April 26th, 2022. Ashbrook, Oregon. The house at 117 Meadow Lane had become a monument to dread. Investigators moved slowly now, as if the air had grown thicker, as if the creaks in the floorboards could bite. Most of the house had been turned over several times, but not the attic. It was sealed behind an old wood panel in the upstairs linen closet, hidden with a thin sheet of drywall painted the same shade as the closet walls. A crime scene technician noticed it only by accident, running a moisture sensor across the ceiling and finding a perfect square of abnormal density. Wilkes ordered it opened immediately. What they found inside changed everything. The crawl space. The opening revealed a narrow crawl space, less than 3 feet tall, but nearly 10 feet deep. It smelled of dust, cedar, and something faintly metallic. Inside were 3 items: a locked metal box with a rusted latch, a set of old cassette tapes, unlabeled, stored in a canvas bag, a wooden rocking chair, facing the wall. It was placed with deliberate intention, as though someone had once sat for hours, staring at the insulation, as though the wall might talk back. Wilkes crouched inside and picked up one of the tapes. On its side, in faded Sharpie, July 17, 1994, Echo number 3. The widow's voice. Back at headquarters, the techs found an old cassette player in evidence storage. Wilkes slid the tape in, pressed play, and heard it. A hiss, a crackle. Then, "If they find these, I want it known that I never started with blood." That came later. First, I was just listening. The voice was unmistakable. Lillian Moore. Not sweet, elderly Lillian, the one with floral aprons and baked cookies, but something darker, stripped of warmth, methodical, cold. The walls talk when it's quiet enough. That's what Margaret taught me. Margaret's voice? Later in the tape, another voice emerges faintly in the background. Younger, software panicked. "Lillian, stop writing while I'm talking, please. Why are you doing this?" Wilkes froze. This had to be Margaret Carlyle, Lillian's sister, the one who disappeared in 1976 and was later found circled in Lillian's Bible. But the tape was dated 1994, 18 years after Margaret was presumed dead. She stayed here. Wilkes reviewed the attic space again, this time looking for DNA traces. Behind the insulation, a sealed panel led to an inner chamber, about the size of a small closet. It had been lined with quilts. There was a pillow, a cracked mirror, and on the wall, scratched in faint capital letters, "I listened." DNA swabs from hair samples confirmed what Wilkes feared. Margaret Carlyle had lived in that crawl space for years. Psychological Control Agent Wilkes consulted with Dr. Harris Groen, a criminal psychologist. His take was chilling. This wasn't just imprisonment, it was indoctrination. Lillian likely used isolation, sleep deprivation, and forced confession to reprogram Margaret. She didn't just kill people, she converted them. Lillian wasn't a lone wolf killer. She was building something, a philosophy, a system. Echo tapes 1 through 5. The remaining tapes, labeled Echo number 1 through Echo number 5, formed a sequence. Wilkes listened to all of them over one sleepless night. The content revealed a terrifying progression. Echo number 1, 1988, Lillian practicing voices, mimicking victims. Echo number 2, 1991, conversations between Lillian and Margaret about balancing the ledger. Echo number 3, 1994, Margaret pleading for release, then gradually repeating Lillian's phrases. Echo number 4, 1998, Lillian planning George Baylor's kidnapping. Echo number 5, 2001, a conversation between Lillian and a young female voice, possibly another recruit. "You must be quiet before you can be sharp," Lillian tells the girl. Silence makes the line straight. The Sharp Girl tape number 5 ends with a chilling phrase. "You're ready now, Kay." Wilkes rewound it. Kay. She played it again. The girl doesn't speak her name, but Lillian does. Kelsey, I need you to remember. If something happens to me, don't finish what I didn't start. Wilkes sat bolt upright. Kelsey Dunn. The second name circled in red in the Bible. The nurse practitioner from Boise. Wilkes had scheduled an interview with her, but now it wasn't just routine. Now Kelsey was possibly more than a survivor. She might be the next Lillian. Preparing for Boise, Wilkes contacted Boise PD again. They agreed to help set up a quiet, off-record meeting with Kelsey Dunn, who had never been suspected of anything in her life. No criminal record. Glowing evaluations from hospital staff. But something didn't sit right. Wilkes reviewed Kelsey's work history again and found a pattern. Every year, around the same week in October, she requested vacation leave. The same week each time. A week coinciding with several missing person reports. Across 3 states. Nothing definitive, but enough to raise alarm. Wilkes packed her case. Boise was next. Final tape. Echo number 6. Before leaving, a tech rushed into the office. Agent Wilkes, you need to hear this. A 6th tape had been found, tucked into the lining of the attic's rocking chair. It had no label, no markings. They played it. Hello, Dana. Lillian's voice. Director. Calm. You must be tired by now. I was too. If you found this, then you're getting close. But I wonder, Agent, have you asked yourself why you keep listening? The ledger wasn't meant to record the past. It was meant to choose the future. April 28th, 2022, Boise, Idaho. Agent Dana Wilkes sat inside a nondescript office suite leased temporarily by the FBI on the outskirts of Boise. She adjusted the files in front of her, the Bible pages, the transcribed tapes, a printed photograph of Kelsey Dunn, and a timeline of the disappearances that aligned all too well with her annual vacations. Outside, the city hummed with its usual rhythm, unaware of the potential storm sleeping within its limits. At precisely 10 a.m., the door opened, and Kelsey Dunn walked in. Mid-40s, professionally dressed, composed. Her expression wasn't nervous. It was curious. First impressions. Wilkes extended her hand. Kelsey shook it firmly, her eyes steady. Thanks for coming, Ms. Dunn. I appreciate you agreeing to this off the record. Kelsey smiled politely. Of course. Anything I can do to help. You said this had to do with Lillian Moore? Wilkes paused. She wanted to see Kelsey's face when she said the next sentence. Yes. You were one of 12 names found inside a handwritten list in Lillian's Bible. Kelsey blinked once, tilted her head. I'm sorry. Who? The memory game. Wilkes leaned in. You were a minor when she may have first contacted you. Does the name not ring a bell at all? Kelsey's brow furrowed, a practiced look of reflection. I don't think so. Wilkes slid a cassette recorder across the table. We have tapes from her attic. You're mentioned by name on one A flicker of something crossed Kelsey's face. Recognition? Or calculation? Wilkes couldn't tell. That's impossible, Kelsey said. I've never met her. The Echo number 5 tape. Wilkes played the relevant segment of Echo number 5. Lillian's voice. You're ready now, Kay. Silence makes the line straight. Young female voice. But what if I hear them still? The others? Lillian. Then you haven't listened long enough. Remember, don't finish what I didn't start. Wilkes paused the tape. That's your voice, isn't it? Kelsey stared at the player for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not confused, not fearful, amused. The revelation. That wasn't me, Kelsey said smoothly. But I know who it was. Wilkes didn't expect that. Go on. Kelsey leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. Her name was Callie. We were in foster care together. Lillian visited the group home twice. I was the one she didn't pick. Callie went with her. Wilkes raised an eyebrow. You expect me to believe there's another woman connected to Lillian, unaccounted for, and you just happen to know her name? Kelsey's smile faded. I'm not expecting anything. You asked who it was on the tape. I told you. Digging for Callie, Wilkes excused herself briefly and called Quantico. She requested a search on Callie, no last name, from Boise area foster homes in the late 1980s and early 90s. The preliminary results were unsettling. There was a Callie Ann Harmon, born 1982, entered state care in 1987, disappeared in 1995 at age 13, case closed as a runaway. But now, maybe not. Kelsey Dunn's real story, Wilkes, returned to the room. So you stayed behind while Lillian took Callie? Kelsey nodded. She was obsessed with quiet girls, the ones who didn't cry. Callie was one of those. I was loud, rebellious. Lillian didn't like me. But I watched, and I listened. Wilkes narrowed her eyes. Are you saying you wanted her to pick you? Kelsey's voice dropped a note. I'm saying I would have been better at it. The shift, the room went still. For a moment, the fluorescent hum of the light fixtures was the only sound. Wilkes spoke carefully. Kelsey, what do you do on your week off every October? Kelsey's lips curled at the corners. Is that what this is really about? Wilkes kept her voice level. 3 women went missing in October of 2016, 2018, and 2021, all within 100 miles of where your phone pinged. Coincidence? Kelsey's smile vanished. Do you have a warrant, Agent? Because if you don't, I'm walking out of here, and you'll be the one following a ghost. Letting her go, Kelsey stood. Wilkes didn't move. You're not ready to finish this yet, Kelsey said. You're still on the outside of the ledger. Then she leaned down and whispered, but you'll find her, the one Lillian saved for last. Just don't ask why you want to find her so badly. The aftermath. After Kelsey left, Wilkes sat frozen. She replayed the tape, rewound it, paused it again at the phrase, "Don't finish what I didn't start." She stared at the page from the Bible and realized something horrifying. Her name hadn't been added later. It had been there from the beginning. Dated May 2nd, 1988, Wilkes's 6th birthday, April 30th, 2022, Ashbrook, Oregon. Agent Dana Wilkes couldn't shake the words, "You'll find her, the one Lillian saved for last." She had replayed Kelsey Dunn's cryptic exit over and over in her mind during the flight back to Ashbrook. It wasn't just a taunt, it was a clue, a confirmation that someone else was still out there, someone Lillian had prepared, someone even more important than the others. And if the pattern held, that person wasn't just a victim. They were the endgame, the 7th ledger. The ledgers recovered from the basement were numbered 1 through 6, but Wilkes had always suspected there was more. The final page of Ledger 6 ended abruptly. May 12th, subject incomplete. Requires conditioning, must not rush the route. No follow-up, no closure, just a sense of unfinished business. Wilkes returned to 117 Meadow Lane alone, just before midnight. She wasn't looking for evidence. She was looking for design, some kind of intentional placement. Lillian had always been precise. That's when she remembered something odd from a previous walkthrough. The mirror in Lillian's bedroom had no reflection of the bed. It had been angled deliberately to reflect only the armoire behind it. Why? Wilkes turned the mirror, and behind it, taped to the wall, a key. The root cellar. The key didn't fit anything in the main house, but out back, buried under vines and moss, there was a storm shelter, believed sealed for decades. The key clicked once, twice, and the door opened. Wilkes descended the rusted stairs, flashlight in hand. The air was wet, clay cold. The space was barely tall enough to stand. But at the far end, behind a sheet of tarp and stacked crates, she found a metal safe, bolted into concrete. The inscription on its top, "Echoes do not end, they choose." Inside, wrapped in velvet, Ledger 7. Not like the others. Ledger 7 was different, bound in leather, its pages thicker, every entry written in red ink, and every page titled with one name, Callie Ann Harmon. But it wasn't documentation, it was training. April 11th, she spoke for the first time. Quiet, but willing. April 17th showed her the ledger. Her hands trembled, but she didn't look away. April 21st, Callie cried after practicing the silence ritual, but she obeyed. The last page. She's ready. She doesn't need a voice anymore, just the ledger. One day she'll write in it without me. The portrait. In the back of the safe, Wilkes found a small oil painting, done amateurishly, but with care. It showed Lillian seated in her favorite rocking chair. Standing behind her, a young woman with long, dark hair, her face turned slightly away. But her eyes, even in the painting, Wilkes felt them. Calm, cold, trained. A note was stapled to the canvas. Callie, when they find me, go to the mountain. Bring the ledger, and choose. The mountain. Wilkes scoured every reference she could find in Lillian's history. Letters, photographs, even Bible passages marked repeatedly with the word ascent. Finally, she found it. A receipt for cabin maintenance dated 2019. Location: Lookout Ridge, a remote parcel of land in northern Montana, purchased under the name Margaret E. Carlisle, Lillian's long-dead sister. It wasn't just a place of retreat. It was a handoff point. Wilkes made the call. I want eyes on Lookout Ridge, drones, infrared, everything. If she's there, I want her alive. But part of her wondered, if Callie was really Lillian's successor, was she still a person or something else now? Callie's last known move. 2 days before Lillian's death, a traffic camera in Spokane caught a blurry plate belonging to a rusted silver SUV registered to a defunct church. A woman was driving. Passenger seat. A shape. Hard to define. Possibly a mannequin. Or possibly a body. The timestamp, April 16th at 11:43 p.m. Wilkes stared at the still image, enhancing the shot. A sticker on the windshield. Lookout Ridge Access Pass, expires May 2022. A theory emerges. Wilkes returned to her motel and paced. The Bible, the ledgers, the tapes. None of them were confessions. They were recruitment. And Lillian's death wasn't the end of her crimes. It was the baton pass. Callie had been groomed, broken, then shaped, not to kill in Lillian's style, but to adapt it, to modernize it, spread it. And if the final instruction was go to the mountain, it meant only one thing. She's waiting for someone. Wilkes realized it might be her. Final entry. At the very end of Ledger 7, in small writing, upside down, on the back cover, she is no longer my echo. She is my mirror. And mirrors reflect what's watching. May 3rd, 2022, Lookout Ridge, Montana. The air was thinner here. Agent Dana Wilkes stepped out of the blacked-out SUV and stared into the dense forest ahead. A tactical team from the FBI's hostage rescue unit flanked her. 6 men and women, each outfitted in black, each silently adjusting their gear. They were perched a half-mile below the last known coordinates of a structure listed under a decades-old false name, Margaret E. Carlisle. A drone had spotted the cabin. It was real, wood-framed, secluded. No power lines, no driveway, just a footpath disappearing into the pines, and movement inside. The approach. Wilkes took point behind the lead agent. Every step up the slope felt weighted, by altitude, by dread, by the growing certainty that this wasn't going to be a rescue. The last drone image had shown something strange. A large circle, maybe 15 feet across, cleared in the snow behind the cabin. Not a fire pit, not tracks, just emptiness. When they were within 200 feet, the lead agent signaled. They split into two groups. Wilkes went with the breach team. The cabin. They approached silently. The place was deathly quiet. No smoke from the chimney, no barking dog, no sign of human life, until Wilkes spotted a string of bones hanging from the awning. Tiny, white, bird-like. Or not. They're human phalanges, one of the agents muttered. The front door creaked open. Inside, clean, warm, Spartan, a bed, a desk, a fireplace, and on the desk, sitting in the middle like a centerpiece, Ledger 8. A letter from Callie. Next to the ledger was a single sheet of parchment, folded precisely into thirds. Wilkes opened it. Handwritten, smooth, no mistakes. Agent Wilkes, you've come far. You've earned this. The ledger ends here, because it is yours now. We all inherit something. You've been reading mine. But you haven't asked the question you're meant to. Not, who is Callie? But, why are you still following the trail? The hidden room. They swept the rest of the cabin and found what they expected. Nothing ordinary. In the back, a door behind a tapestry. A spiral staircase led down. At the bottom, no blood, no screams, no captives. Just books. Shelves and shelves of them. Spiral notebooks, journals, newspaper clippings, Bible studies, ink-stained manifestos. The walls were covered in mirrors and scrawled in red paint across every reflective surface. Look at her. In the center of the room sat a chair, and on the chair, a recording device. The final echo. Wilkes pressed play. A woman's voice, steady, calm. Younger than Lillian, but with the same cadence. Do you know why you're here, Dana? Because you think you're different. But you're not. Not really. You kept coming, not because of duty, but because something inside you responded to the way she saw the world. You didn't want to find Lillian. You wanted to understand her. That's how it always starts. A chilling realization. Wilkes dropped the recorder, turned to the mirrored wall, saw herself, and something clicked. All this time, she thought she was chasing a killer. But the deeper she followed the ledger, the more her instincts aligned. Not with justice, but with method, structure, ritual. The hidden camera. An agent called from the edge of the room. They'd found a camera embedded in the ceiling, tiny, motion-triggered, and broadcasting. Wilkes followed the cable to a secure hard drive. Dozens of video files, labeled by date, each one titled with names, past agents, past visitors, even townspeople. They were being studied, not by Lillian, by Callie. The trap was the journey. Suddenly it all made sense. Lillian hadn't just prepared a successor. She'd prepared an audience, a reader, a follower, someone who could appreciate the craft, someone who would continue the silence. And Callie, she hadn't run. She'd orchestrated this, all of it. Wilkes hadn't found her. Callie led her here, the bloodless room. There were no bodies, no cages, no violence, just a ledger, a name, a recording, and a slow, creeping sense that Wilkes hadn't stopped anything. She had completed it. One final message. As she stood in the center of the mirrored room, another audio file triggered, motion activated. Callie's voice again. You're not looking at me, Dana. You're looking at yourself. That's where the ledger always ends, with the one who reads it. May 3rd, 2022, Lookout Ridge, Montana. The final ledger sat in Agent Dana Wilkes's hands like it had always belonged there. Bound in black leather, unmarked on the outside. No title, no number, no name, only weight. She took a breath and opened it. The first page was blank. The second, not. A familiar hand. Wilkes stared at the writing, the loops of the G's, the way the T's weren't crossed until the next line. It was her handwriting. Exactly. But she hadn't written this. She was certain. The entry was dated April 24th, 2022, the day she had returned to Ashbrook from Boise. The exact timestamp, 3:37 a.m. She'd been asleep in a motel then, or thought she had, but the page read, "Return confirmed. Subject K receptive. Callie's design aligns. Ledger continues." Wilkes felt cold crawl across her skin. Flipping pages, she flipped forward. Each page detailed an interaction from her investigation. The George Baylor interview, the Boise meeting, the attic discovery, even the thoughts she hadn't voiced. She suspects Kelsey, but knows she wants to believe her. She's hoping the ledger ends before it begins. There were no cameras in those moments, no transcripts, but they were written here, word for word, pages unwritten. After 10 pages, the writing stopped. The rest of the ledger, blank, waiting. For her, Wilkes shut the book and stood from the mirror-lined room. Tactical agents swept around her, still checking the cabin, still unaware that the real trap wasn't physical. It was psychological, spiritual, intentional. Quiet becomes loud. Outside, the forest swayed in a breeze that didn't touch her. Wilkes looked up toward the treetops. For the first time in days, she realized how quiet it was, and how comforting that silence now felt. No sirens, no questions, just stillness, like the hush that follows a ritual. She remembered what Lillian had said in one of the tapes. When the silence feels holy, the ledger is ready for you. A choice. Back at the temporary field office, Wilkes sat alone. She placed the ledger on the desk and stared at it. Open, blank, inviting. She picked up a pen, not to sign, just to feel it, in her hand, waited, connected. She could end it here. She could write a final summary, close the case, destroy the ledger. Or she could continue it. Not because she wanted to kill, but because she wanted to understand. To ask what Lillian had once asked in her first journal. When does observation become participation? A flash drive. Before leaving the cabin, the text had also found something inside a hidden wall panel. A flash drive. Wilkes inserted it into her laptop. A single file, an image, a scan of a handwritten page. Lillian's handwriting. The title, Future Candidates Preliminary. And on the list, last in line, Dana Wilkes, circled twice, underlined once. The note beside it, "We'll chase the truth. We'll confuse it for justice. We'll follow it into herself," closed the book. Wilkes stared at her name, then shut the laptop. She ran her finger along the spine of Ledger 8. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the window across from her, and she thought, maybe this isn't how legacies begin. Maybe this is just how they repeat. May 7th, 2022. Portland, Oregon agent Dana Wilkes returned to her apartment at dusk. The sky hung in that heavy gray stillness that only Oregon knew, neither threatening rain nor promising light. She closed the door behind her, dropped her keys on the counter, and walked in silence to the bedroom. She hadn't spoken since Montana. Not to her colleagues, not to herself, not even to the voice in her head that had started asking the real question. What will you do with it now? The ledger, Ledger 8, was in her bag, unopened since Lookout Ridge. She hadn't written anything, but something had. The bedroom. Her bedroom light flickered as she turned it on. She froze. Laid neatly on the center of her bed was another copy of the ledger, identical in every detail. Same leather binding, same unmarked cover. But this one wasn't blank. She opened it with shaking hands. The first page had a new entry. May 7th, subject returns. Still silent, still listening. Perfect. Beneath it, a red fingerprint. Not hers. The fingerprint. The Bureau's forensic lab would later confirm the fingerprint belonged to Callie Ann Harmon. But that would be days later. And by then, the damage was done. Because this wasn't just a message. It was an invitation and a warning. Surveillance footage. Wilkes immediately checked her building's security cameras. The footage was intact. But the woman walking the hallway at 4:11 a.m. was not recognizable. Blonde wig, surgical mask, a slight limp. She didn't look at the camera once. But when she passed Wilkes's door, she paused. Held something in her hand. Then continued. In and out in 11 seconds. Clean, precise, trained, a message on the mirror. Wilkes turned back to her bathroom, and there, scrawled on the mirror in red lipstick, the ledger isn't written by the hand, it's written by the mind. And underneath, it's already yours. Dream or memory. That night, Wilkes dreamed of Lillian's voice. It wasn't frightening, it was soft, coaxing, as if she were standing behind Dana's childhood bedroom door. You've always kept records, Dana. Your notebooks, your case logs, your silent judgments. The ledger didn't change you. It found you. She woke in a sweat. Ledger 8 on her nightstand, open, and the next page filled in. May 8th, she questions herself. Good. That means the line is near. One last tape. A package arrived the next day. No return address. Inside, an old mini DV tape, labeled simply, Echo Number 0. It was grainy, black and white. The image flickered like candlelight. It showed a young girl, maybe 10, sitting on a hardwood floor in a school uniform. She stared at the camera, then at someone off screen. Then she said, "You don't have to teach me what they did wrong. Just show me how to keep the silence." The timestamp, 1990. The girl, unmistakably, Dana Wilkes. Epilogue. 2 weeks later. The Ashbrook PD received an anonymous package. Inside, a flash drive.